Not so sure exercise 7-7, posting from the cash receipts journal. So we're going to be posting it from the cash receipts journal this to the accounts receivable sub ledger and to the general ledger. So I have this handy instructor tip pop up for you about posting this other accounts column. So the only thing on here before we get to the other accounts column, the only thing that we post here at the end of every day are AR and AP. So in this case, here's our AR. So we post this at the end of July 18th and this at the end of July 29th. And everything else, all these totals are posted at the end of the month. So when we get to this other accounts column, this 2350 is going to be posted to the interest revenue at the end of the month. However, when we're going to keep the original July 12th date, so let me show you a picture of the solution. So again, here is that amount of 2350 we are posting to that interest revenue, and we're going to post it to the interest revenue sub ledger up here. And notice, even though it's being posted at the end of the month, that we are keeping the original July 12th date, unlike the other accounts here. So that's the only posting date that's kind of confusing in this problem. So let me go ahead and minimize this and get back to our problem. So the first thing we need to do when starting this problem is we need to total each of these columns. So when we add up all the cash, all of these debits, we get a total of 11,050. And then for sales discounts, that's pretty easy, just the 75. And then for accounts receivable, that is going to be 6575. And our sales revenue, 2200. And then we have other accounts credit, so that's 2350. And finally, cost of goods sold and merchandise inventory, 2100. So we can go ahead and check our answer. Good job. So now we're on to requirement 2. The following 4 column accounts in the accounts receivable sub ledger have been opened for you. Accounts receivable, Doris, balance of 5475. Accounts receivable, Nguyen, balance of 1100. Post the transactions to the accounts receivable sub ledger. For accounts with a $0 balance, enter a 0 on the normal side of the account. Enter the transactions in chronological order in the next available row. If an input field is not used in the ledger, leave the field empty. Do not select any information and do not enter a 0. So here's our AR sub ledger for Doris, and here's our AR sub ledger for Nguyen. So each of them has a balance, and then where does that balance go? So we have, for Doris, we have that 5475. Is that a debit or a credit? All AR balances go on the positive side, so ARs increase on the left side. So that is going to be a debit of 5475 here for Doris, and then we have 1100 for Nguyen as a debit as well. And then we are going to post any AR amounts from the cash receipts journal up here. So we see cash receipts journal, and we're going to go in chronological order. So the first one we see here under accounts receivable is that $1,100 credit on the 18th for Thai Nguyen. So we can go ahead and get that in here. So that was again July 18th. And the posting reference for that is CR. So we have a cash receipts journal here of page 3. And then we have a debit or a credit. We had a credit because she paid down that AR balance. And then that leaves us with a debit balance of 0. All right, and then we go down the list here, so thankfully don't have to scroll back up. We have July 29th for Quinn Doris, and actually we do have to scroll back up just to make sure we have the accounts receivable transaction here. So we have that for $54.75. So July 29th, posting reference was that same page of the cash receipts journal, page 3, and a credit of $54.75 to pay off that AR balance here for Doris. And in the real world, after this part is done, we would put a check mark here in the cash receipts journal in the post reference column here. But they will be doing the posting later in this problem. So let's go ahead and check our answer. Well done. And now for requirement 3, there's quite a bit here, so we'll just take it as it comes. So the following selected 4-column accounts in the general ledger have been opened for you. So cash, account number 111, has a balance of $5,000. So we see cash here in the general ledger. That balance is on the what side? The debit side, because cash is an asset. And then accounts receivable, also an asset, so the balance is going to be debit side as well, is $65.75. So $65.75 is a debit balance. We have merchandise inventory, a balance of $3,000. Merchandise inventory is an asset, so that is a debit balance of $3,000. And then sales revenue, a balance of $2,300. So sales revenue, the normal balance is on what side? The credit side. So we'll get down to sales revenue here for $2,300. On the credit side is the beginning balance. Sales discounts, no balance. And sales discounts, the balance runs on what side? The debit side. So we can put 0 there. And going along, we have interest revenue, also a 0 beginning balance. And interest revenue is a revenue account, so that means the normal balance is on the credit. Okay, then we have cost of goods sold, which is an expense. The beginning balance is $13,800. And with expenses like cost of goods sold, the balance runs on the debit side. That is the normal plus side there for the balance. So now our task is to post the total of each column to the general ledger. Also post the other accounts to the general ledger. Enter an opening balance for each account. For the accounts with a $0 beginning and our ending balance, enter a 0. We have done that on the normal side of the account. Enter the transactions in chronological order in the next available row. If an input field is not used in the ledger, leave the field empty. Do not select any information and do not enter a 0. So now we need to post the total of each column to the general ledger down below here, and that is in requirement 1. You can open that cash receipts journal this way in the homework problem. However, this won't be available on the test, otherwise it would give away the answers to the first part of the problem. So you can either then scroll up and down, take a screen snip, whatever you need to do, or a picture with your phone in order to have this information handy, or just the old-fashioned way of scrolling. However, we are going to start by inputting this information from left to right. So the first one is $11,050 here as a cash debit. And then again, what date is that on? July 31st, the end of the month. Posting reference is CR3, and we are debiting for $11,050. And that's going to give us a balance of $16,050. Next, an easy one, we have a debit here to the sales discount. So let's go ahead and scroll down to our sales discounts. So we have July 31st, and we have posting reference CR3, and then we have a debit of 75 with a balance then of 75. So we have accounts receivable. We need to credit here on July 31st. So we'll input that posting reference, and then we are crediting the $65.75, And then that means our balance ends up being 0 there in the accounts receivable. And then next in line is sales revenue credit of $2,200 here on July 31st. So we can go ahead, find sales revenue here, July 31st, posting reference CR3. And again, what was that? It was a credit of $2,200. So we're going to need to squeeze some things around here. So 2,200 credit, and then the balance becomes 25,200. And let's see what's next. We have other accounts credit for 2,350. So that was that interest revenue. And remember, with the interest revenue, it's that one odd one where we have to keep the July 12th date instead of the end of the month date here. Let's find that for 2,350. So we have July 12th, reference CR3, and then interest revenue is a credit of 2,350, and then the balance ends up being 2,350. All right, and then the reason we are keeping that date there, July 12th, instead of the end of the month is because in this cash receipts journal, the account here, interest revenue, is listed under other accounts credit here. So we have to keep that original date. All right, and now we have a cost of goods sold debit here that we have to input for 2,100. So let's our cost of goods sold, July 31st, posting reference CR3, and it is a debit of 2,100. And that gives us a balance of 15,900. And we also have that sneaky merchandise inventory credit here for 2,100 as well. So let's go ahead and find the merchandise revenue right here, July 31st, posting reference CR3, and merchandise inventory is doing what? That was a credit. So going down, and that means we have a balance of 900 since our merchandise inventory was decreased. All right, so that's all looking great. Let's check our answer. So now we are ready to check our answer. Excellent. So here's our cash receipts journal now that we've posted to the subledger for AR, and we posted all of these totals. So we need to tell anyone else reading this that these totals have been posted. So don't post them again. So I always like to start with the one that's easy to miss. So this is the other accounts here for the 2,350 that was posted to interest revenue. So right here we have to put the interest revenue account number. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll up and find interest revenue, and that was account number 419. And what did we do here? We did post that credit of 2,350. So that looks good. Posting reference of 419, which is the account. And now let's work down our accounts receivable column. So where was this 1,100 posted to? That was posted to the AR subledger for Thigh that we did at the beginning, or I should say part 2 in the orange here for the AR subledgers. So there's Thigh's $1,100 credit there. So that was posted, and notice that it says we select a check mark to reflect posting to a subledger. So that is going to be a check mark. And then we're going to do the same here for Doris. So we go back up to the orange, our AR subledgers. We did credit 40 or 54.75. So that was good. And we do a mark there. Again, we are putting this check here because we are confirming that we did post this 54.75 to a subledger for Doris. And let's find the cash account here. So we'll find what number that is here in a second. So it's 11,050. So we will find our cash, and that is here. We did debit 1150. So that looks great. Account number, that's the important part, is 111. And that's where it was posted to. And then we need to keep moving. So we have sales discount of 75. Let's have a look. We do have sales discounts, 75 debit there. I should have said debit, oops. Actually, that is not an oops on my part. It looks like the authors messed this one up. So sales discount should be debit, not CR credit. They did get it right, however, in the first portion here, sales discount debit. So we can go back down here, and that was account 412. So we're going to say yes, for the sake of this problem, that is correct. And then accounts receivable credit. So let's find our accounts receivable. That is 112. Posted that. Sales revenue credit. Let's find our sales revenue account. And that is 411. Posted that. Other accounts credit. So because this other accounts credit could be any number of accounts, we can't say that this is all posted to 1. So we enter an X if the column total is not posted. So in this case, X. And then lastly, we have COGS and merchandise inventory. So let's see what those are. So we have COGS 511, merchandise inventory was 118. So that's going to be 511 over 118. Let's go ahead and check our answer. Excellent. All right, so we're in requirement 4. Now they want us to prove that the amount in our AR balance in the ledger equals the total in the AR sub ledgers. So we have balanced the total of the customer balances in the accounts receivable sub ledger against AR in the general ledger. Same thing I just said. For accounts with a 0 balance, enter 0 in the appropriate fields. So on the test, you are going to have to scroll back up to the general ledger. However, on the homework, you can go ahead and click the link here in order to view it. It makes it nice and easy. So they're asking us what the accounts receivable, what balance is it? Is it debit or credit? Well, accounts receivable, the normal balance is on the debit side. But then what is that balance for us? It is 0, since all the AR was paid off. So that is 0. Now we need to close out of this and go into our sub-ledgers to see what the balance is. So lovely, a 0 here for Doris and a 0 here for Thai. So we can go ahead and input those. 0 Doris, 0 Thai. Total accounts receivable is 0. So that means our general ledger matches our sub-ledger. So say Doris called you and asked, I'd like to pay off my balance. How much do I owe you? You'd go to the subledger back up in the orange and you'd find Doris and say, oh, you owe us $0. So in this case, let's go ahead and check our answer. Excellent.